Hello everyone. Tonight, when the wind has calmed and the moon has risen, I would like to tell an old story, a misty legend in the middle of the ocean, about a ghost ship drifting without a crew, about souls quietly entering the mist and never returning. The name of the ship was Mary Celeste. No one knows what happened, only that it was found in the middle of the vast ocean, empty, cold, and eerily quiet, and from then on, the curse began to spread with each sea breeze, carrying many unanswered questions, like a quiet lullaby between the waves and the mist. Now, if you are ready, let me take you on that journey, a journey with no return. Like a ghost drifting silently through the stormy seas, the Mary Celeste appeared on the misty horizon one early December morning in 1872. The sea was as smooth as a silver mirror, the weak sunlight filtering through the gray clouds, illuminating the bare masts and the strange, moss-covered hull. No voices, no footprints, no distress signals, just a driftwood with an absent soul. The crew of the Dei Grazia were the first to see the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly in the waters between Portugal and the Azores. From a distance, the ship seemed to be asleep, the mainsail torn at the top, an anchor chain hanging in the water like a tangled hair. They rowed closer, filled with doubt and nameless unease. As if entering a sacred place cursed since time immemorial, when they went on deck, they found no one. The wheelhouse was empty. The logbook stopped abruptly on a clear morning, showing no signs of anything unusual. The dining table in the captain's room had unwashed dishes, the meal unfinished as if the crew had just evaporated between spoons. The wardrobe was still tidy, the luggage had not been ransacked. Everything was strangely peaceful, like a play abandoned in the second act. The silent question echoed in the hearts of the witnesses: where had they gone? Where the sea holds ancient secrets, the wind whispers of lost things, the waves cry out the longing of restless souls, the story begins where the ship left port, with the heart of a man, Captain Benjamin Briggs. He was a stern, pious man, with the silence of the sea and the meaningful eyes of one who had seen things that could not be told in words. It was said that Briggs heard the wind talking to the ocean, and he believed in signs in the sky and under the sea, where every wave was a song of the gods. The Mary Celeste left New York Harbor on November 7, 1872, carrying a cargo of industrial liquor, along with his wife Sarah and their young daughter Sophie, and a crew of 7. The night before departure, Sarah dreamed that the ship turned into a giant snake, entwining itself around the sun. She told the dream in a whisper, as if afraid someone would hear. Briggs just smiled, saying nothing, but there was a glint of sadness in his eyes. "There are things we must do," he said. "Even if the wind changes." The sea was gentle at first, as if it wanted to trick the traveler, lulling them into a peaceful breathing rhythm. The ship glided gently across the blue water, leaving behind a trail of waves that sparkled like the Milky Way. Sophie often sat on the deck, watching the seagulls fly by, asking her mother about the stars at night, about the giant fish at the bottom of the sea. One night, she asked, "Mother, why do I hear people singing in the wind?" Sarah bent down, stroking her daughter's silky hair. "They are mermaids, my dear," she said. "They sing to remember those who have fallen asleep in the deep sea." Briggs stood nearby, listening to every word. He did not smile. On the 14th day, the wind began to change. The gray clouds rolled in like a gloomy army, the sea dark as bloodstone. It was a moonless night, and the Mary Celeste was shrouded in a fog so thick that the man standing at the bow could not see the after deck. The sails groaned like a lament. And then, they heard footsteps. No one was on board, but them, the heavy, uneven footsteps echoed from the bow toward the cargo hold. John Anderson, the engineer, went down with a lantern, followed by the mate Richardson. They opened the hatch, peering into the deep darkness. No one was there. There was only the sound of wine sloshing in the barrels, the strong smell of alcohol, and a chill that seeped from what should have been a dry and warm place. John looked up at his friend, his mouth moving. Something is looking. The next day a strange bird landed on the mast. Its feathers were as black as ink, its eyes as red as hot coals, and it did not move for 3 days. The sailors quietly avoided looking at it, and whenever anyone mentioned it, the wind rose fiercely. On the third night, Richardson was missing. His cabin door was wide open, the oil lamp still burning. The bed was not moved, there was no sign of a struggle, only a pair of shoes neatly placed at the foot of the bed, and the looking glass had a single diagonal crack. Briggs ordered a search of the ship. No one said anything, but fear was already beginning to germinate. The air grew thick as melted wax, each night longer than the last, each creak of wood a haunting whisper in the crew's ears. It was a sleepless night. They all gathered on deck, staring into the thick darkness. Briggs sat alone, his eyes fixed on the horizon as if waiting for a signal. As the clock struck midnight, the wind suddenly stopped completely, and then, a song began. No one knew where it came from, but it was clearly a violin, playing Danse Macabre by Camille Saint-Saëns, though no one on board had an instrument. Sarah held Sophie tightly, her hands trembling. Briggs stood up, walked slowly toward the bow. He said something, very low, very softly, as if conversing with someone invisible, and then, he disappeared. The ship continued to drift, empty, save for the 4 sailors, Sarah, and little Sophie. They tried to hold on to their senses, but one by one, they faded into the mist. John whispered to the shadows in the corner. Harris shaved his head, saying the wind had sent a prophecy. Sarah wrote in her diary, "Benjamin left us like a dream. I no longer know what is real. But I still hold my daughter, though the sea swallows my soul." And then, no one was left. The Mary Celeste drifted silently, carrying her sealed soul, until she was found, like an unanswered question. Later, it was said that night, as the ship drifted without a man, the sea calm and without a ripple, a shadow covered in a long silver ash cloak stepped onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, not from the water, nor from the air, but as if emanating from the very rotting timbers of the ship. There was no face, only a deep void in the hood. The wind whispered his name like the groan of an old tide, Navrul, the scribe of lost souls. Beneath his footsteps, each footprint left a pale ash powder glow. The old ropes on the deck tightened themselves, the tattered sails moved slightly as if trying to stretch out from under the broken mast. And in the cargo hold, barrels of wine began to ooze, drops as dark as dried blood, seeping into the planks, invading the very core of the ship. The Mary Celeste was no longer a merchant ship, it became a coffin floating at sea, and the first soul that belonged to it was Captain Briggs. No one knew where he went. But his spirit, still wandering. In the night, there were heavy footsteps, whispers calling Sarah's name in a voice that did not belong to the living. A few weeks after the ship was found, people said they saw the shadow of a man in a captain's coat standing on the cliffs of Gibraltar, looking out to sea as if waiting for a return trip. Some said the shadow did not touch the ground, and dogs howled as they passed by. As for the Mary Celeste, after it was towed to shore, no one dared to steer it. Captain Morehouse of the Dei Grazia, who had discovered the ship, received a reward, but lived the rest of his life haunted by it. He refused to mention the ship, and in his private diary he wrote in shaky black ink, "It is not empty. It is just waiting." Years later, on a strange blue moonlit night, a man named Elias Marin, a wandering scholar and collector of ancient folklore, came to the sea where the Mary Celeste had been pulled ashore. Elias did not believe in ghosts. He said it was mere coincidence, the paranoia of seafarers. But one thing intrigued him: of all the ghost ships recorded in books, the Mary Celeste alone showed no signs of damage, plunder, or mutiny. Everything was as if it had just left port. Only the crew was missing. Elias hired an old fishing boat and set out into the misty sea where the Mary Celeste's spirit was believed to drift. He brought with him an ancient compass, a book of ancient curses of the sea, and a candle made from white whale fat. In the middle of the night, when the fog began to thicken, he saw it, the ship, the Mary Celeste, but not as it was depicted. This time it glowed dimly as if covered in silver ash, the masts rose like the spine of some ancient creature, and the deck was covered with footprints, but no one was standing there. Elias climbed up. The wood beneath his feet groaned, as if it were bearing centuries of memories. The air was salty and damp, but his chest was cold. He walked to the cockpit, and found it as it had been written, a map spread out on the table, a compass still spinning slowly, and a diary, the last page of which was blank. He put his hand on the diary. As his hand touched it, the wind rose suddenly, and a voice spoke, not from outside, but from inside his head. "Write." Elias tried to pull his hand back, but his hand was no longer his own. It opened the blank page, picked up the quill lying beside it, and began to write. The words appeared in dark ink, not blood, not ink, but something alive. The words told of an ancient afternoon, when the Mary Celeste was called the Amazon. It had carried an object, an ebony chest, inlaid with the symbol of the three-headed whirlpool, which no one dared to open. It had been purchased from a sunken temple off the coast of Tunisia, where the last priests of an ancient race had vanished without a trace. Since then, all who had boarded the ship had met with misfortune. The chest had been left at the bottom of the hold, and it had never been opened. Elias had written that far when the lantern went out, a cold hand was placed on his shoulder. He turned. No one was there, but in the mirror, someone was standing behind him. Elias is gone. The fishing boat drifts to the empty shore. In the boat is his notebook, with a single page written on it, "I do not write with my hand. Mary Celeste is the mouth of the well, and I am the echo. It does not seek a steersman, it seeks memory." Years later, off the coast of Bermuda, someone reported seeing a faint ship every time the full moon touched the horizon. Brave fishermen rowed closer, but never returned. Survivors said they heard singing, the singing of a child. It was like the wind, like the waves, like someone singing a lullaby, said an old fisherman, his eyes misty. "When I turned back, my child was gone." and I heard laughter in the mist. Now, when the sea is unusually calm, passing ships tie a bundle of seagrass to the top of their masts, as if asking permission. Old captains know, there are souls that do not die, only need a ship to stay, and Mary Celeste, she did not die. She only slept. Waiting for those curious enough, brave enough, or foolish enough to come aboard, then she drifted away, carrying another story, another soul, forever. As the centuries turned and the world began to forget the old songs of the sea, the Mary Celeste sailed on, without wind, without rudder. New generations saw her name as a footnote in an old history book, a worn mystery. But beneath the sea, where the light did not reach, dreams still breathed, and then, one particularly cold winter, when the northern seas were covered with fog and ice, she emerged again, this time, in a storm. The fishing boat Halbert Starr, from Cornwall, was caught in a whirlwind in the middle of the night as it attempted to cross the Bay of Biscay. On board were 6 men, old and experienced, and a young man named Alaric, a land-born man who dreamed of the sea. Where his father had disappeared when Alaric was a child, as lightning struck the water, and the rudder snapped in the wind, they saw a faint light in the distance, not a beacon, not a star. It was a ship, its faded wooden planks reflecting the lightning like mummified skin. It did not float, but stood still as if anchored by an invisible hand. The captain of the Halbert Starr, Gerd Hayne, who had seen death and survived war, shook his binoculars as he saw the old name painted on the hull, Mary Celeste. They did not intend to step aboard. No one was so foolish, but the sea chose. A wave broke, pushing the Halbert Starr alongside the Mary Celeste. The mooring lines snapped, forcing the 2 hulls together. For a moment, a strange gangway, made of wood not from either ship, appeared to span the 2 sides. No one saw who had placed it. No one knew where it had come from, and Alaric, as if guided by a silent call, stepped across. He did not look back, no one told him to stop. As Alaric stepped onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, the sky above him darkened, the storm sucked into a spot where the ghost ship's mast had broken. The wind died, the waves eased, and all sound died away. Only one thing echoed in his mind: "You are of the old blood." He didn't understand, but his feet kept moving, leading him to the captain's quarters. The door opened soundlessly, and Alaric found himself standing before a tall, spider-webbed mirror that had once reflected the faces of Briggs, Sarah, and the rest of the souls who had not yet been released. But in the mirror, it wasn't him, it was his father. The father had been missing since Alaric was born. A sailor on a cargo ship, gone without a word. In the mirror, he called out to him, not with words, but with a look that held a plea that had lasted for decades. Alaric reached for the mirror. As soon as his hand touched it, the door behind him slammed shut. He was pushed into the mirror like a lake, and the world changed. He awoke in a red darkness, a bottomless depth, filled with unringing silver bells, huge eyes flashing in the waves of fire. This was not the world. This was the memory of the Mary Celeste, a world inside the ship, the spirit realm, where all who had ever set foot on it were kept. Briggs stood there, eyes ashen, mouths dry as if they had not spoken in 100 years. Sarah held Sophie, their eyes lifeless. Elias Marin was writing endlessly, pages fluttering around like black butterflies. They all turned to look at Alaric. Briggs moved closer. Placing her hand on his forehead, "You are the descendant of the last keeper of the chest." Alaric gasped, "The chest? What chest?" And from his mind, memories that had never lived flooded back. An ancient memory, from his ancestor, the one who had been the navigator of the Amazon. The one who had brought the ebony chest aboard. The one who had been warned not to open it. But opened it. Inside, not a treasure map, but a heart, no longer beating, but still breathing, a heart that was not his, a heart that had belonged to a guardian of the sea. When the chest was opened, the curse began. And Mary Celeste became its vessel. Each generation, a soul that had to be sacrificed. Each soul, a memory devoured. Alaric understood. He was the last one who could break the curse, but only by becoming a part of it. Briggs looked at him, and said nothing, but her eyes were pleading. Alaric looked at his mother. She was still alive on the mainland. Her eyes were just like Sarah's. He swallowed, and walked toward his heart. No one knows what happened next, but the next morning, when the sun rose, the halberd star was found at sea, drifting but intact. No Mary Celeste, and no Alaric. Captain Gerd Hayne later wrote in his log, "He went over to the other side." And the wind began to blow against him. Many years had passed since the night Alaric disappeared with the Mary Celeste. The old lighthouses were covered with moss, the survivors were old, and the memories of the ghost ship were slowly fading into the mists of time. But one thing remained the same. Every time the blue moon rose over the calm sea, a faint call echoed in the hearts of those with the blood of a sailor, a nameless excitement, a dream of sails drifting through the void. In a small tavern on the shores of Galway Bay, on a night when the east wind blew from the north, a blind woman appeared, dressed in a cloak the color of sea mist, with long hair like seaweed, holding a silver staff carved with an upside-down anchor. She did not order, did not greet anyone, but only said one question, "Who carries the dream of the lost?" And in the midst of the silent crowd, a young woman stood up. Her name was Isolde. Isolde was not born near the sea, but as a child she drew pictures of ships she had never seen, and wrote in her diary in a language no one had taught her. In her dreams, she saw a dark-haired boy named Alaric, reaching out to her from a foggy deck. Her father, a man of unknown origins, lost at sea before she could speak, left only one thing behind, a small round piece of wood, carved with a three-headed spiral. When Isolde placed the piece on the table, the blind woman nodded. "You are the last blood." Then she sang, not a human song, but a chant from the time before writing, with the kind of sound that made cats howl, candles go out, and waves crash against the shore like funeral claps. That night, Isolde dreamed of the sea opening. A watery path, winding like a whale's spine, led to a place where there was no light, but no darkness either. A portal in the shape of a ship's hull opened, and on the other side was the Mary Celeste, sleeping between the twisted heavens, suspended like a heart lost in the chest of time. Alaric stood there, but he was no longer human. He was the new guardian, the keeper of the chest, the guardian of the ship's dreams and its last breaths. He said nothing, only held out his hand. Isolde woke, and knew, she must go. She set out in the headwind, carrying nothing but the ancestral log, a blank diary, and the song of the blind woman who had disappeared in the night mist. No one went with her. But the waves, for the first time, carried her, rather than hindered her. The gulls followed, not for prey, but as if to send her off. And the sea, strangely, opened like a living map. 3 nights later, she encountered a lightless mist. In the heart of that mist, she saw pieces of driftwood, not rotten, not heavy, but like solidified memories. Each piece emerged: Briggs, Sarah, Sophie, Elias, Alaric, all asleep in the mist, eyes wide and unblinking. A silver current swept her away, and she crashed against the misty hull, the Mary Celeste, whole, strange, and breathing. The door opened for her, no one greeted her, but the deck, for the first time in centuries, echoed with footsteps. Isolde stepped forward, the piece of wood in her hand, and the wind shifted. Beneath her feet, the old footprints came back, layer upon layer, as if all the souls the ship had ever held were watching her. She reached the hold. The chest was there, still closed, still pulsing slowly, but this time, it spoke. "You are the last. Open me, or be next." Isolde bowed her head, and placed her hands on the lid of the chest, and she sang, not with the blind woman's words, not with her own voice, but with the voice of the ocean, of all who had ever called Mary Celeste. The song did not release, did not end, but dissolved the ship. The wood turned to foam, the mist melted into light, the soul became a bird and flew up to the sky, circled the blue moon one last time, and then dissolved into the wind. And the chest, it opened, nothing, just a small piece of mirror. She looked in, and saw herself, sitting in the captain's room, in the midst of a new Mary Celeste, writing from scratch. No one ever saw the Mary Celeste again, but sailors said that if they sailed far from land on the last full moon of winter, they would see a brand new ship, silver planks, a mast like a giant fish bone, and on top was a young girl in a gray dress, holding a white diary. She did not seek a substitute, she sought someone to tell the story. The years passed silently like the receding tide from a deserted shore. The Mary Celeste was no longer a physical ship drifting silently on the ocean. She had become a living legend, a tangible memory, a breathing dream. No one could see the wreck anymore, but somewhere in the night mist, one could still hear the creaking of the wood, the wind blowing through the invisible sails, and the soft song of a girl named Isolde. She did not die, she became the last door. In a faraway land, where the white desert sands meet the deep blue sea, a child was born at the moment of the 7th blue moon setting in the great cycle, something that only happens once every century. The child did not cry or breathe, but when placed in his mother's arms, his eyes opened, round and bright as pearls, and he looked straight up at the sky. His name was Cale, and that night, the tide was seen to recede for miles, leaving behind a series of wooden planks of unknown origin, engraved with the symbol of a 3-headed whirlpool. Cale grew up with strange dreams. He saw nameless ships, faceless people, and journeys without a shore. Whenever he put his hand in the sea, it grew warm. And whenever he touched driftwood, he heard a whisper, "I am waiting." When Cale was 14, he was called one day to the oldest room in the village, the place where all the maps, records, curses, and legends were kept. There, an old parchment was unrolled, engraved with a single line, "He who continues will be freed, or trapped forever in the final chapter." Cale did not understand, but his hand trembled as he touched the parchment, for he recognized the handwriting. It was exactly like his own. Even though he had never written a line like it, that night, his dream was different. This time, he did not see Mary Celeste, he saw a room full of mirrors, each reflecting the memories of those who had boarded the ghost ship. All of them were calling to him. And in the middle, was Isolde. She did not age, she did not sing, she just sat there, holding her diary. Unfinished. He woke up with a hollow feeling, as if time had passed inside him without leaving a trace on the outside, and then, at the old, unused harbor, a small boat, never built in the village, was found anchored, bobbing on the sea. On the boat, there was a notebook. The cover had a line engraved in a language Cale had never recorded, but he could read it as if it were his own name, and when he opened the notebook, there was only one page, write. Then enter. Cale looked up, and saw the deck of the Mary Celeste in the mist. No one called, no one rowed, but she was as clear as the moon on water. He did not turn, no greeting, no asking why. He knew, the ship did not seek answers, it sought a storyteller. Legend has it that, since Cale boarded the Mary Celeste, the ship no longer appears in the mist. She drifts in stories, like a spirit living in the dreams of the teller. Whoever dreams, whoever writes, whoever remembers, all fuel her endless journey, and the Mary Celeste, she remains silent, waiting for the next dream, waiting for the next hand, waiting for someone to listen, because in the end, that ship does not carry a curse. It is the memory of the sea, the echo of the disappeared, and the story that will never be finished.